Hello, everyone. This is Hua. Welcome back. I am here to read the final chapter of Distant Hope. I certainly hope that you have enjoying the story. Next month is my Horror Fest month, so all stories will be horror stories, just for the fun and the fright of Halloween. So if you have a story that you'd like to submit to me, please remember to send it to the email in the description below. I look forward to hearing all your stories, and I certainly hope that you will enjoy me next month. All right, well, let's get started with the story, shall we? Sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Running through the crowd on a busy street. Need to find some air in the summer heat. So how about the music, like a whisper from the sea, and a little slow dancing with me.
The rain had stopped as Stacey lay against Brandon, watching the sky begin to darken. Their lovemaking was amazing, and she felt the tingles everywhere as she placed her hand on his chest, and when she looked up, he was watching her with his dark eyes. You realize this changes everything between us? She asked. He laughed and held her closer. I wanted to hear that since I began to realize I loved you in a way that friends shouldn't feel. Why didn't you ever tell me that you loved me? He tightened his arms. Would you have listened? She thought about it and replied, I don't know. Maybe not. Exactly. They were quiet for a moment, and when Brandon spoke again, she could hear the emotions he tried to strain from his voice. You know, when I heard that you married Jake, I went blind with anger. Every time I thought about him taking what was rightfully mine, it drove me into a deeper hole. Do you know the feeling of being held underwater and feeling as if your lungs are about to burst open? She nodded. That's what I felt when I heard you took his last name. I just wanted to hurt something so that it felt as bad as me. She pushed herself up, her hair falling over her shoulder. Brandon, I married him because I thought I loved him. You know, at that point in my life, I thought that that was love. And now I don't think I ever really knew what it was. He lifted a finger and pushed her hair strands away. Of course not. If you think you knew what love was, you were in the wrong boat all along. What you felt was love, but in a disguise. She leaned down and their lips touched lightly. He rubbed his nose against hers and inhaled her scent. Will you tell me about Lizzie's mother? He stilled, and then he let out a breath. There's nothing to tell. No matter what anyone says, Lizzie is my daughter. It doesn't have to be my blood in her veins. I bathe her, I clothe her, and I fed her. She's mine, that's all that matters. What will you do if her mother should come back into Lizzie's life? Why don't you ask me what you really want to know? She looked away and tried to move, but he grabbed her and spun her around. She stared into his darkening eyes, and suddenly she felt shy and naked around him. When she tried to move again, he got up and gripped her shoulders. Stacey, ask me. She let out a breath. Will you let her back into your life should she return? He shook his head. No, not in a million years. Why? She's Lizzie's mother. She's Lizzie's mother, yes, but that's all she is. She's not my woman, and she never will be. The woman I want is in my hands right now. How can I trust you? How can I trust that you won't leave me behind like Jake? How can I trust my heart that it won't break a second time? You know, I don't think I could make it if it was you who broke my heart in two. Tears filled her eyes, and she looked away as they fell down her cheeks. He turned her around and used his thumb to wipe her tears away. Pulling her closer to him, he kissed her lips gently, and when he pulled away, he tilted her chin to look up at him. You don't have to worry about anything, Stacey. I have always loved you, and I always will. Nothing, do you hear me? Nothing will stop me from loving you. I never give up what I love most. A sob tore at her throat, and she threw her arms around him. Why didn't you tell me you loved me? You know, you could have saved me so much heartache. You could have saved me from crying bucket load of tears. Why? Why? He pulled away from her. If it takes me a lifetime to make it up to you, that's what I'll do. sound of the horn honking woke Stacey from her sleep. She threw on her robe and walked out of the room to hear Aunt Bea asking for her. She walked into her aunt's room and turned the lights on to find she was in bed with her covers up to her chin. Her pink foam rollers were on her head, and she looked like she'd been sleeping deeply, just like Stacey. "Who is that?" Bea asked. "I don't know. I'll go check." She walked down the stairs, turned on the lights, and walked to the door to pull it open to reveal Jake standing on the front porch. He was wearing a wrinkled white t-shirt and torn jeans. His hair looked as if he hadn't washed it in days, and he had bloodshot red eyes with a full-grown beard. She was so shocked that she almost stumbled over by his appearance. "Hi," he said. "Jake?" He ran a hand through his dirty hair. "Yeah, it's me. I'm sure I look like a mess." "What are you doing here?" He laughed and replied, "You're not going to believe it." Stacey crossed her arms. "Let me guess. Your so-called little angel dumped you?" "Are you going to let me in?" "No. Why should I? Is this how you're going to treat me? It was a mistake I made, and now you're going to pay me with cold shoulder." "Cold shoulder? You think this is cold shoulder? I haven't even begun." Stacey heard a sound and knew Bea was coming down the stairs in the elevator built by the stairs for her. She turned around, and sure enough, Bea was wheeling herself toward the door. "Hello, Jake," she said. "Aunt Bea." "Hello," he said. She looked at Stacey. "What is going on here?" "I'm just here to visit," Jake said quickly. "Your niece, though, has another set of plans in mind. I mean, she's not being very nice right now." "Well, if I remember, you weren't nice to her in the first place either. But I am not a person who lets guests sleep outside of my home, so I guess you better come on in." Stacey let out a breath as Jake walked past her. She slammed the door and followed them to the living room where Jake situated himself on the couch, and she took the lazy chair. One, it was more comfortable, and two, it was farther away from Jake. "Stacey, make up the guest bedroom for Jake. I suggest we all go back to bed and we can handle this in the morning," Bea said as she wheeled herself back to her room. "I know you hate me," Jake said as Stacey was getting the bed ready for him. She slipped the pillow into the case and fluffed it up. Tossing it on the bed, she groaned at him. "What I feel right now is not relevant to you. I'm sorry. Just forget it, okay? Sleep here tonight, and tomorrow when you wake, I want you gone, out of here." She walked to go, but he grabbed her arm. "Stacey, I can't even begin to tell you how sorry I am." She jerked herself free from him. "Let me go, Jake. Just because you're here, it doesn't mean you can get funny ideas of us being back together. It's one night only. And make sure you shower before you get into the bed." She walked back to her room and closed the door, feeling as if the world had just laid a ton of bricks on her back. Was she a bad person? Did she do some sort of crime in her past life? Is that why she's paying more than she's receiving? She sat on the bed and covered her eyes with her hands. This was going to be one long night. The next morning, Stacey woke up to an arm around her waist. She turned and found Jake beside her. When she got up, Jake moaned and stirred as he sat up. She pulled on the robe, yanked the covers off of him. He looked up at her with tired eyes. "Morning," he said. "What the hell are you doing in my room?" she cried. "We're husband and wife. What's wrong with that?" "Correction. We were husband and wife. We're not anymore. Get out of here." He stood up unsteadily and ran a hand down his face, something she'd seen him do hundreds of times when he first got up in the morning. She crossed her arms, suddenly feeling violated from him. He looked up at her and cleared his throat. "I'm sorry. I miss you," he said. "Well, that doesn't give you the right to sneak in here when I'm sleeping and get into my bed. It doesn't include you anymore, and you're certainly not invited." He raised his hands. "All right, I heard you the first time. I'm leaving." As soon as he left, she let out the breath she was holding and shook her head in disgust. Staring at the sheets, she ripped them off. They needed some major washing. After she dressed, she came down the stairs and heard the commotion in the kitchen. Jake's voice was laughing along with her aunt. She rolled her eyes at how fast he was already winning over her. She felt sick to her stomach and decided to go outside instead. The weather was already blaring hot, and she felt her skin begin to sweat from the heat. Taking a deep breath, she took a step down the stairs when she was pulled from behind and yanked around. She faced Jake's freshly shaved face and when she tried to push away, he tightened his grip. I came here to make amends, Stacey. I came to say I'm sorry. I'm here because I want you back, he said. She shoved him off. And what makes you think I'm going to welcome you? Don't you remember what you did to me? You left me with nothing but heartache. If it was up to me, I'd have left you out here last night. He tried to walk to her, but she stepped back. Come on, Stacey. Quit playing hard to get. You know you want me. She laughed. Do I? Why would I want a pebble in my shoe? His smile died down. Seriously? You really look at me like a pebble. What else do you want me to say? All you did was make me feel as if I was dying. I was worthless to you. You crawled into various women's bed while you had me at home, and it didn't even occur to you that it would hurt me. I built my world around you, Jake. I did. I molded myself into the wife I thought would fit you. And what did you do? You crushed me into tiny pieces and scattered me to the winds. I'm left trying to find my heart in every corner of the world, and even if I ever do find all the pieces, I will never be the same again. What makes you think I'll relent and let you do it again a second time? What do you want me to say, Stacey? Nothing. I don't want you to say anything. Just leave me alone, Jake. She walked down the stairs and came face to face with Brandon walking toward her. Her eyes shifted from his, and she turned to walk away.
I used to stay up all night trying to find my place, chasing neon lights and looking for some kind of trace to lead me out of darkness, give me a little faith, something to make me stronger, someone who could light the way. Then you came to me and you gave me reason.
Brandon's eyes followed Stacey walking away, and when he returned his gaze to the front steps, found Jake standing there staring at him. He took in a deep breath and already knew the reason for Jake's return. He walked to the man as he came down the stairs. The years had been kind to him. Brandon would admit that much. There wasn't an ounce of fat on him. Brandon was sure that he worked out to keep his figure. But men like Jake had only his body and nothing else. His heart wasn't made of gold, that was for sure. He felt the slightest bit of jealousy bite him as he thought about the years this man had spent holding Stacey in his arms at night. Brandon! What's new with you? Jake asked. In this place? There's nothing new. Laughing, Jake replied, Yeah, I'll give you that one. What are you doing here? Oh, my wife is here, so I came to check up on her. Brandon stilled his pounding heart. Wife? I thought you two were divorced. Perhaps we did divorce, but I'm gonna win her back. What are you doing here, man? I don't remember you being close with her aunt. What brings you around? I came here to see Stacey. Jake closed the distance between them. And what makes you think Stacey will see you? Laughing, Brandon replied, Perhaps that's something you should ask her. Excuse me. He walked around the house and found her sitting by the oak tree that separated his mother's home from her aunt's. She looked fragile, and not like the woman withering from pleasure underneath him last night. She looked up when he reached her, and he grabbed her neck, pulling her in for a kiss. When he pulled away, she stood up and put her arms around him. He showed up early this morning out of the blue, she said. He pushed her gently away and cupped her chin. Did he try anything? She looked away, and his heart stopped beating for a second. When her silence became unbearable, he cursed and dropped his hands. She turned away from him. He snuck into my bed this morning. I could kill him. Turning back around, she replied, But you won't. And even if you could, I wouldn't let you. Why not? Don't tell me you still love him. Laughing, she shook her head. No, Brandon. It wouldn't be worth it. Jake is the type who likes it that he's able to draw attention from you. He would love it if you tried to do something to him. It means that he got what he wanted. Brandon walked to her and took her hands. Why didn't you let him in? I didn't. It was Aunt Bea. If it were up to me, I'd have left him outside. But don't worry, he'll be leaving soon. He nodded. Good, because I missed you last night, and if I had my way, you wouldn't have slept alone. She smiled. Well, it's good that I have my bag of tricks. Brandon returned home after leaving Lizzie with his mother and making sure that Jake had no more tricks up his sleeve. He arrived home and saw a red pickup parked in his driveway. He frowned as he walked to the door and looked in. A suitcase and some empty fast food wrappers were littered on the floor of the car. He came to the front and saw that the license plate read California. Who did he know from there? Brandon! He turned and found Janelle coming down the steps of his front porch. He almost dropped dead in his tracks. First Jake, now Janelle. What was the world coming to? Janelle was smiling as she came toward him. The years had been more than kind to her because she hadn't changed a bit. She still wore clothes that were a bit too tight and kept her hair long and straight. The only difference was that she had lost weight and no longer carried the curves she once did. She was wearing a pair of jean shorts and a green shirt that brought out the blue eyes of hers. No doubt she was the owner of that red truck. Janelle, what are you doing here? He asked. She shrugged. I was in town. Laughing, he replied, You were in town. That license plate says California. Okay, so you caught me. I'm back home. I had enough of the West Coast and decided to come back. Besides, I wanted to come home to you and our daughter. The words tugged at his heart, and all he could think of was Stacey and her sweetness. Here stood the woman who had delivered his daughter, who thought the world was perfectly normal. How could she even imagine that was beyond his imagination. He watched as she continued to smile as if things hadn't changed between them, as if she hadn't left him a daughter to raise alone. Janelle, what are you doing back here, really? Her smile faded when she realized he was serious. Brandon, I thought you'd be happy to see me. I mean, come on, we have a daughter together. Oh, suddenly you remember you have a daughter, huh? You didn't quite remember that when you packed and left her for me to raise on my own. You didn't remember about that when you lied to your parents that I was the one who got you pregnant. Nor did you remember about me when you decided you weren't fit to be a mother. Janelle's eyes filled with tears. Why are you being this way? I was young and naive, okay? But I'm back. That's what counts. I am back here and I want to make it work. He shook his head. And what makes you think coming back here will make anything work? Do you ever think about anyone but yourself? Did you ever stop to think about what this would do to Lizzie, or to me, or my mother? Ever since I can remember, Janelle, you've only taken and taken from others. You'd never give back. What makes you think I'm going to give you a second chance for something I know will never change? She is my daughter too, Brandon, and if I have to fight you in court, I will. Oh, go ahead, please. Please, go ahead. I can't wait to see what will happen when I tell the judges about how you left her here for 6 years. Janelle started to cry and ran her hands through her hair. I'm sorry, Brandon. I am so sorry. But you have to understand that now I'm all alone. My parents died a year ago and I'm alone. Brandon let out a deep breath. I'm sorry to hear about your parents, but I can't do anything for you here. You're in the wrong place. Is there another woman in your life? Is that it? Is that why you're pushing me away? He walked to her until they were face to face. There's always been a woman in my life. She's my daughter, my biggest fan, and the only person who has never given up on me. I want to see her. Fine, you can see her, but on my terms and conditions. Name them. You leave town after you see her. I don't want her to get hurt. Nodding, she replied, Okay, fine. The afternoon sun was warm as Stacey chased Lizzie around the backyard with her hands outstretched like that of an airplane. Lizzie was yelling for her to run faster to catch her. As soon as she yelled at, Stacey picked up the girl and swung her around. I got you, she cried. You cheated, Lizzie yelled. Are you calling me a cheater? I'm going to tickle you. No, please, I hate the tickles. Stacey dropped to the ground on her knees and began to tickle her belly. Lizzie burst out in laughter and put her arms around her neck as the two of them rolled together in the grass. They landed a few feet away on their back, out of breath. Lizzie was still laughing as Stacey stood up. You win, Stacey said. Lizzie sat up and shot her arms in the air. Yes! You up for some cookies milk? Nodding, she said, Yes, please. Okay, go inside and wash your hands. All right. As Lizzie ran inside her grandmother's house, Stacey stood up and Jake joined her outside. She ignored him as he walked to her holding a glass of lemonade. All morning long, she'd been ignoring him and he knew it. So he did what he did best. He came into every moment she was in and tried to sneak into them. She had been wondering why her aunt hadn't asked him to leave. She hated the sight of him, and the thought of him sneaking into her bed this morning made her want to vomit. You have a good relationship with his daughter. You think she'll ever call you her mother? He asked. I'm not trying to be her mother. Good, because you never will be. You know, Jake, why don't you just pack up and leave? You're not wanted here. He took a drink from his lemonade. You're not the owner of this house. Last I heard, I was welcome to stay as long as I wanted, and I intend to. Stacy shook her head. You were so set on leaving me for the dead, Jake. Why are you back now? You took my money and you left me with nothing. You honestly think I'm going to make this easy on you? He shrugged. I don't care, but I'll leave when I'm good and ready. Before she could answer, Lizzie came running out laughing and shouting her name. Stacy turned to find her laughing as she ran to her. But then a red pickup truck came into view, and Stacy watched in horror as Brandon came out and Janelle followed behind him. Lizzie turned and ran to give her father a hug, and he picked her up. And then he brought her over to Janelle, and Stacy felt her insides turn to mush. Jake laughed and stepped in to stand beside her, letting out a deep breath. Ah, there goes the lovely family. That's what happens when you fall in love with a man who has baggage, Stacy. His wife comes back and they're one happy family again, he said. Stacy ignored him as she watched Lizzie shake hands with Janelle, and then Brandon handed her to her mother, and mother and daughter walked off. Without looking at her, Brandon followed them into his mother's house. Hurt, Stacy turned and ran inside the house as Jake chuckled loudly after her. As soon as she reached the privacy of her room, she burst out crying. She didn't understand how easily Janelle could sneak her way back into Brandon's world. He had said all she was to him was the mother of his daughter, but the woman he loved was her. It didn't look like that from her view. It pretty much proved that no matter how much she loved, she ended up getting hurt. Was she carrying a bullseye on her head that said, "Hurt me here"? Tears streamed down her face and she wiped them away, angry that she had let him hurt her that way. She heard a knock and Aunt Bea opened the door, closing it on her way in. I saw that she's back. Are you okay? She asked. Stacy nodded and swallowed down a sob. I'll live. I've lived through worse than this. Bea smiled. That's my girl. She wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. Jake has to go. He's not wanted here. Don't worry about Jake. You just worry about yourself. I'll take care of him. Don't take too long in here. Stacy nodded as her aunt wheeled herself out. When she heard the knock again, she cleared her throat and assumed it was Bea. But when the door opened, Brandon walked in. She froze as he closed the door and walked to her. She wasn't prepared, and he grabbed her by the waist, slamming her against him. And then he bent down and kissed her hard. It ignited everything she had felt last night, and she didn't doubt for a moment that she loved him. Her heart raced, and she felt her toes curl in her shoes. When he pulled away, both of them were panting hard. I know why you're hiding from me, Stacy, but you're wrong. I don't want her, and I never have, he whispered. Stacy sobbed and turned away from him, but he grabbed her and wrapped his arms around her. He held her and kissed her hair. I saw everything. You guys were perfect together. He pulled away and touched her face gently. It doesn't matter what you saw, because all you saw was me handing my daughter over to her mother to see. From a stranger's view, yes, it looks like a perfect family. But don't you remember that she was the one who broke my heart when she left? No matter how much she may come back to plead and beg, I will never change my mind. But Lizzie needs her mother. Lizzie doesn't even know her. I don't want her to come in and make her feel as if she was the reason why her own mother left. It's the truth. Lizzie was why Janelle left, and I would never forgive her for that. And Lizzie doesn't need a woman like that in her life. I won't allow it. Stacy nodded. I know that your daughter comes first in your life, and I love you for that. But I can't be involved if there's a chance that you will allow Janelle to walk back in. I've been broken once, and if you break me again, I'll die. He took her hands. What did I tell you before? You're the only woman for me. Janelle has never been the one I wanted. She frowned. But you have a daughter together. Letting out a heavy sigh, he kissed her knuckles. Yes, that's the only good thing that came from us. Janelle got pregnant and told her parents I was the father, because I was the only one she knew who would take responsibility. When her dad threatened to take me to jail, I married her. Afterwards, the truth came out and she left. So did her parents. She only came back because they died and she had no one to care for her. In other words, she needed a safety net and I was it. Wow. But right now, Lizzie is my daughter. I don't care what the DNA says. I bathe her and I clothe her and I fed her. She's mine all the same. Janelle just wants a place to fall back on because she's lonely. I never loved her and I never will. Doesn't Lizzie need her mother? Brandon shook her head. No, not if she's going to be here today and gone tomorrow. I don't want my daughter exposed to that kind of hurt. I love her too much. She's got my mother, and now you if you accept her. Stacey felt her eyes fill with tears as she threw her arms around Brandon. I would love to accept her. She's such a beautiful being. He pushed her gently away. Come on, let's go. Hold on. Before we do anything, I need to talk to Jake. There's nothing for you here, Jake. You might as well go back and find something to do with your life. We're over. Nothing you do or say will get me to come back with you, Stacey said. Jake was sitting by the oak tree staring off at the clouds. Stacey sighed deeply and walked to sit beside him. He looked up at her with eyes as bright as the sun, and she saw that there was moisture in them. He took a deep breath, and when he opened his mouth to speak, she put her fingers against his lips. Don't say anything, Jake. It's not going to change one bit. At one point in my life, I did love you, but you didn't love me enough. You didn't look at me as if I was your only one. Although I gave you my entire world, you never found me at the top of your list. I was always second. And for the longest time, I thought it was my fault. I thought perhaps if only I was prettier and thinner and smarter, you'd turn to me for love. But now I understand that when a man truly loves a woman, he'll take her as she is without having her change a single thing. They grow together. You and I, we grew apart. Jake took her hand and held it in his. I know what I did wrong. It's just a little late for me to figure that out. It's my fault. Everything that happened in our marriage is my fault. I didn't appreciate you enough. I didn't hold on to you enough. I let you cry alone when I had promised never to. And I let you face the world all by yourself. Worse, I held other women in front of you. I wasn't a good man. Stacey's eyes filled with tears. We were so young, Jake, and what we thought was love wasn't. I want you to find someone who will love you. No need to ask who you want. She blushed. Is it that obvious? Nodding, he said, yeah, but he's a very lucky man. Thank you. I think I'll leave here soon, but I don't want you here when I go. I want that chapter closed. As you wish. Stacey walked around the house and found Janelle standing against her red truck waiting for her. Janelle hadn't changed a bit. The woman moved toward her and held her hands together as if she was nervous. Brandon told me about you, she said. You're very lucky. He's a good man. Stacey smiled. He's a great father. That, too. Lizzie is crazy about him. Where will you go? She shrugged. I don't know. But all I know is that this isn't home anymore. It's not the same and I can't fake it. I heard a lot of people and I don't think this place is good with that. Small towns have a thing of that. Janelle's smile faded and tears filled her eyes. Would you take care of them for me? Of course. I don't think I'll ever return. I promised Brandon I wouldn't, but I also don't want to face familiar faces that hold grudges. Just promise me that you won't hurt them. I won't. And you promise me that you will forgive yourself. She nodded through tears. I'll try. As Stacey walked back into the house, she turned around and found Jake walking to Janelle's car. They exchanged words, and he tossed his bag in. He got into the truck and she sped off. She let out a long breath and walked into the home to find Lizzie, Verna, and Bea sitting together at the kitchen table, mixing a batter of cookie dough. What are you doing? She asked. We're making cookies, Lizzie said with a smile on her face. Cookies? You're going to get sick, little girl. You just had some cookies. Daddy says, as long as I can get you to say yes, I can have all the cookies in the world. Stacey froze. What? She felt a pair of arms slide around her waist and felt his lips close to her ears. Say yes. Be mine. She turned around and faced Brandon's warm, gentle eyes, and then, with a smile on her lips, she replied, "Yes." Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Distant Hope. I certainly hope that you enjoy the story. I'll see you in the next episode.
Running through the crowd on a busy street, need to find some air in the summer heat. So how about the music, like a whisper from the sea?